Hello, friends from South Korea. Nice to meet you all. And friends from elsewhere as well. This is Edward Wen speaking from Macau. So very glad to be speaking to you, and I'm so honored. So I wish to first of all extend my gratitude to Dr. Jagu for the invitation from Global English Teachers Association. I'm so very much honored and flattered. As a matter of fact, I'm sure, okay, Dr. Gu actually can speak on this topic much better than I do. He has done interesting work on working memory. But anyway, here I am, okay. So I'm very glad to share with you my latest thinking and thoughts about working memory in second language research and practice, okay. Hopefully, we can work it, okay, through the PowerPoint slides in 40 to minutes and hour. Okay, let's see. So hopefully in the coming 40 minutes or so, okay, I'm going to cover 5 things. Okay, first of all, I will introduce, okay, the nature, structure, and functions of working memory, okay, through the evolution and the theoretical models. And then I will focus on my own understanding of how we should conceptualize working memory and how we should measure it, okay, in second language. And as a matter of fact, I'm thinking of including first language as well, okay? So it is a taxonomy of working memory in first and second language. And then, okay, we are going to look at some of the converging evidence from second language research, okay, from both meta-analysis results and from some specific strands of empirical studies as conceptualized from the PE model, okay. And finally, we're going to look at some of the theoretical implications and for example, as okay, it is informing second language acquisitional domains and L2 sub-skills. And at the end, I'm going to look at working memory as a language aptitude component. That is the things that I've been working on in the past 10 years or so. So that is pretty much what we are going to cover in the coming 40 minutes. And let's see. So to begin with, here is an outline for human language, human memory systems, okay. As we can see, okay, when informations are coming from the environment through sound, through visual input, etc., they first go into some sort of sensory memory, which will then stay in our workspace memory, which is limited in capacity, okay. And finally, okay, some of them are disappearing while others are making their way to long-term memory. So it is so strange that many years ago, 1890, when the godfather of modern, I mean not modern, okay, memory research, William James, okay, in 1890 already mentioned that working memory, or in those days it was called short-term memory, was actually the primary memory, while long-term memory was secondary memory. So when I was doing my PhD in the late, okay, in the early 2000, okay, in Hong Kong U with Peter Skian. So I fell in love with working memory. I had a strong conviction of it being a very important component for language learning and processing. So that is my focus on working memory and short-term memory. Okay, of course, if you look at it from a broader perspective, working memory actually is at work in many aspects of our life. Okay, for example, when we are doing mental calculations, okay, oral calculation, for example, if you are asked to multiply 23 by 18 orally, and you need to first of all save the products of the previous, okay, calculation and keep on okay, doing the calculation so that you can work out the answers towards the end. And if you look at the sentence, rats live on no evil star, okay, you will find that actually it is what we call a palindrome, okay, in which sense it means that it can be read from both directions. The same for the state, okay. And of course, this reminds me of our many years ago, I was teaching MBA students, okay, Economics 101, okay. This is a famous riddle in economics, okay. And of course, we don't have time to go over it, but if you are interested, you can work it out. But what it says is, on the one hand, you need to keep things on the saw, and on the other, you also need to keep moving. So storage and processing are two main functions that are associated with working memory in our immediate consciousness. Okay, so this is working memory at work in many facets of our life. That's what we call centered cognition. Okay, if we look at working memory, you cannot go past by, okay, Alan Bradley's what we call multi-component model. This has been called the classical model of working memory. And it was first, okay, of course, raised by Alan Bradley and Graham Hitch, okay, in 1974, okay. So in this model, okay, working memory was conceptualized as a multi-componential construct, okay, or system, okay. But of course, for language researchers, the most important component is what they call phonological loop, or later I shall call it phonological working memory, as some of the cognitive psychologists are calling it. Okay. More importantly, okay, Alan Bradley and colleagues have called the phonological loop or phonological working memory as the language learning device, in that it is instrumental in acquiring phonological, particularly novel phonological, okay, forms. In other words, sounds. So from this multi-component model, okay, phonological working memory is a language learning device. But this is only one tradition of working memory research. Even though it is the classic, it is, okay, evolving the concept. And of course, the rising star was the North American tradition, okay, which was spearheaded by researchers such as Nelson Cowan, okay, who has put forward this attention model of working memory, in which he believed that working memory refers to the focus of attention embedded, okay, within our long-term memory. And of course, another contribution from Nelson Cowan, which is also very relevant to language learning and research, okay, is the magical number 4 plus minus 1. Okay, as we know, the magical number 7 plus minus 2 was first raised by George Miller, but Nelson believed that it was too optimistic. As a matter of fact, it is more realistic to have around, okay, 4 plus minus 1 chunks of information in our immediate consciousness. So this is very important and has gained more popularity nowadays among language researchers and working memory researchers as well. So of course, before that, we also have Randy Engel, okay, and Michael Caine, who has put forward this inhibitory control model, okay, and we call this the executive control model of working memory, okay, the third, okay, cognitive camps, okay. So in their opinion, working memory is about the ability to control attention, in particular, inhibitory control, okay, so that you inhibit irrelevant, okay, information and keep the relevant information in an active, okay, state. So another contributions they have been making to the literature is working memory is measured by the operation span task, in which they believe in the domain general capacity. And this task has been very popular among language researchers and cognitive psychologists as well. So these are the three basic working memory models. There are many more, of course. And for example, the neurocognitive model of working memory is the another. And there are 11 altogether in Miyake and Shah's 1999 classic book. But we mainly look to the three classic models, and because it is cognitive based. And but what about language? When we look at working memory, it is related to language. So I'm thinking, because there are so many working memory models, maybe we need to reconceptualize the construct so that it is applicable to language, which is a domain-specific genre, or what we call domain-specific field. So I am trying very hard, to put forward what we call a taxonomy of working memory for language, for bilingual education, and for cognition. So in this taxonomy of working memory, working memory is conceived as a cognitive system that possess very limited capacity, which is a signature feature of the construct. Of course, it is manifesting in two significant ways. Number one is the span in which it can only hold information. As human, we can only hold 4 to 7 chunks or units of information. Between 4 to 7. I mean, both of them may be right. But then also it is the time duration. Limited time duration. When information comes into our working memory, it only stays in our immediate consciousness for only about 15 to 20 seconds, and they will be disappearing without rehearsing. So in order to rehearse, in order to keep them in our brain, we need to rehearse or repeat. So otherwise, they will be gone. So in recent years, Morten Christiansen also, with Nick Chater, has put forward this famous now or never bottleneck effect, in language learning and in psychology. And of course, this is also related to what we call sometimes less is more or more is better. Because for young kids, it seems that a small working memory seems to be to their advantage, while for adults, more is better. So these are all still debatable, in not just language, but also in psychology. So feature number one, limited capacity. That will be very important. This is the overall signature feature for working memory in order to understand the concept. And then it is also important to realize that working memory has multiple components and or embedded functions. For example, according to Alan Baddeley, we have the phonological loop and the visual spatial sketchpad and the central executive. As we can see, of course, in 2000, they also have a fourth component, which is called the episodic buffer. But as it has not been studied much by language researchers, its relationship with language has not been thoroughly understood. And then, of course, in terms of measures, we have what we call the simple memory span task, and the complex memory span task. We will say more about that. And finally, now that is very important for language research as well, which has not been considered much by second language researchers, which is the activated long-term memory is integral to working memory. For example, we haven't included much on long-term memory or L2 proficiency in working memory research. And if it is long-term memory, we may need to think about Michael Ullman's declarative and procedural long-term memory model, in which he argued that declarative memory is related more to lexical knowledge, while procedural is related more to rule learning. Okay, and of course, the final caveat for current working memory SLA research is how we are going to address the issue of L1, L2 dynamic interactions. Okay, so in my understanding, working memory, okay, is the primary memory for learning, while long-term memory is similar to, okay, L2 proficiency. It includes, of course, okay, L1, okay, as we will see very soon. Okay, so that is the taxonomy of working memory. I'm currently working on a book or contract for, okay, Cambridge University Press Elements in SLA series, okay, working on this monograph for arguing for a taxonomy of working memory for language. Okay, so of course, working memory limitations, okay, has become very interesting, okay, topic for language and psychologists in recent years. Okay, people have been arguing maybe working memory or short-term memory limitations are language universals. As you look at more and more languages, okay, once we decide on the head, okay, word in a sentence, like a verb, most likely before it and after it, there are no more than 7, okay, units. Okay, that is the underlying limitations for human processing power. Okay, and that is constrained by our working memory limits. And of course, in, okay, linguistic sciences, okay, or language sciences, okay, recent years have witnessed, okay, a research of interest in working memory limitations, okay, and of course in our upcoming book, which is I'm currently working on, the Cambridge Handbook of Working Memory and Language, okay, we are looking at different theories, okay, and one of it is the relationship between working memory and dependency grammar, okay, the mean dependency distance for all human languages, okay, natural languages, is less than 4. So we do find some magical number 4 and magical number 7, okay, components for language. But these are not our focus for today, as we are focusing on second language. But of course, just to mention briefly, okay, William O'Grady, okay, from Hawaii, okay, has recently argued that working memory or memory limits are what he called the third factor, okay, instead of the, okay, actually the third factor is the most important, okay. In the past, Chomsky has called UG, universal grammar, is the priority, is the first, is the most important, while for usage space, they call experience is most important. But perhaps we need to think about working memory limits as the third factor, but it is the primary, okay. So, and of course, he has done research in linguistic and language processing research, looking at English, Russian, and Korean, by the way, okay, to argue that working memory limitations not just constrain our human, okay, language, ranging from phonology to grammar. Okay, so that is something beyond our process. But I've tried to look at what do people research, okay, in working memory and language, and we will see that actually the picture is very complex. Okay, so I'm also working with Michael Bunting, okay, for a chapter for a book dedicated to Alan Baddeley, okay, looking at working memory in first and second language. We try to integrate acquisition, processing, development, intervention, etc. So it is a complicated picture, but we'll be working very hard towards to sorting out some of the complicated ideas. So in terms of working memory and first language, okay, in psychology, okay, was the what we call pioneering work has been done, okay, but mostly they can be classified into 2, okay, camps, okay, at the beginning, the British camp, which was headed by people like Alan Baddeley and Sue Gavico, okay, and they look at, okay, most of the time in the past, okay, they look at phonological loop and vocabulary and grammar learning, and they found that phonological loop, or what I call phonological working memory as a language learning device. But of course, recently, okay, Aaron Bradley and Richard Allen has looked at episodic buffer, which is important for binding, and that one has not been addressed in second language. Okay, and on the other hand, we have people, okay, like and Danimer and Carpenter and Just and Waters and Kaplan, etc. They look at the relationship between working memory and reading comprehension. But when they refer to working memory, they are referring to the executive control of working memory. In other words, it's the central executive, okay, and its relationship with language processing, particularly in reading comprehension. And they also found that the central executive is related to many post-interpretive, okay, processes like reading relative clause processing, ambiguity processing, pronoun processing, etc. So these are the pioneering work which has informed and inspired, okay, first language, and there are many more, but basically they are looking at things like reading familiar words and okay, and vocabulary acquisition, syntax, grammar acquisition, learning to read, learning language comprehension, speech production. But those were the results in the early 1990s, okay, 1993, and they haven't, okay, updated the data, but we will see. To some extent, okay, they have painted to us, okay, some pictures, okay, for drawing or portraying working memory and L1 relationships, okay, looking at phonological working memory and executive working memory are the two main components that are related to different, okay, L1 domains and activities, okay. And so these are the L1 literature, but of course, today our focus is on L2 learning. So in most of our literature review, okay, articles, we are saying that Michael Harrington and Alan Jeffs, okay, and Mark Sawyer, okay, 1992 paper was the early, okay, usually the early, okay, paper to be cited in L2, okay. So their argument is, okay, if L1 is UG based, then L2 or SLA depends more on general learning mechanisms, okay, and like working memory. So in this case, working memory play a more important role in SLA than in L1, okay. So if L1, okay, learning, if it is automatic, then SLA is more likely to be characterized by controlled processing, which requires more cognitive resources. In this case, it is perhaps more relying on working memory. Barry McLaughlin, okay, in 1995 has argued, okay. So Peter Skian and I are working on a recent paper for annual review of applied linguistics. Okay, at this moment, actually, we should be submitting it. Okay, so working memory penetrates, okay, all SLA stages, and working memory components correspond with SLA cognitive processes such as noticing, etc. So we, on the one hand, SLA is stage sensitive. On the other, it is corresponding to working memory components, which can be considered language aptitude components. So that is the major argument, okay? So according to Miyake and Freeman, who also argue that working memory as language aptitude, okay, at least in highly skilled L2 users, L2 processing may draw from the same working memory resources as L1 processing, okay? And there is the last argument here I put forward, okay, Nick Ellis, okay, what we call sequence learning, okay? So in the past, people are saying that what is grammar? So maybe in usage space, okay, there is no such thing as grammar, okay? Language learning is, in essence, acquiring sequences or chunks, okay? Working memory being instrumental in the chunking process of L2 sequences involving vocabulary, is sequence of sounds, okay, formula, okay, grammar meaning construction. So it is all the way sequence, and phonological working memory is important in this chunking process. So you can see we have different arguments, but to quite a large extent, we mostly believe that working memory may be more important for SLA, than in L1. Okay, we do have a lot of studies even before my 2016 book. Okay, but of course we would like to summarize. Okay, on the first hand on the on the one hand, working memory is related to L2 domains and activities such as vocabulary learning, similar to L1, formulaic and collocations, which is quite interesting, new studies, and then morphosyntax or grammar structures, So there are emerging, or converging evidence, that we are going to repeat, and then on the other hand, executive working memory or working memory as measured by the complex memory span tasks, are found to be more related to L2 skills and L2 interaction, reading, speech production, written production, L2 interactions, and finally also rising what we call a emerging research paradigm is working memory and interpreting, which is a very, very demanding cognitive task, because you need to both understand and produce. So I consider it as at least, comprehension plus, in production, so that is going to be very important in working memory research. So look at these studies. 10 years ago I started, 10 or 15 years ago I started working memory SLA research, and I found some problems. First of all, I found the term working memory when I talk to people from different schools, different traditions. I found that they refer to working memory. Working memory for them refers to different things. For example, the British camp would refer to more to do with the phonological loop. While the North American camps would say actually it is more like executive control aspect of working memory. So we do need a taxonomy of working memory. Where we are going to have what I called finer grained demarcation of working memory components and functions. And then we have a whole bunch of working memory span tasks, such as the non-word repetition span, the reading span, the operation span, and of course we have also a lot of empirical studies saying that they are confounding domain generality and domain specificity. So we do have a lot of challenges posed for meta-analysis when the measures are not consistent. There are also other issues. For example, when we use a composite working memory score, we need to be aware such a score should not confound phonological working memory and executive working memory, as I shall argue. They may not be going in the same direction, or they may not be correlated. Finally, we have different issues of working memory effects. So we can classify working memory effects into main effects, and sometimes when we found no main effects, it does not mean that it is the end of the story, because there are other types of effects which I shall point out, interaction effects, threshold effects, which is interesting, but only one study has been done, so far as I know. Finally, of course, as I have mentioned already, the interactions with long-term memory, in other words, L2 proficiency, seems to be an issue or not an issue of research. So that is a lot of room for development. And I have written with Aaron Jobs and Paula Winke on the measurement issue. So I've been arguing in my recent monograph, working memory and in second language learning, and second language learning, in which I try very hard to integrate working memory theories into second language acquisition theories. See, in this what I call integrative model or integrated perspective, working memory and second language. We need to look at the nexus. From 4 layers or 4 levels. So the very bottom level is long-term memory, where L1 and L2 are located. And then the next level is working memory components, which is a conceptual level for working memory components and drawing inspiration from Alan Battley's model. But then when we are looking at working memory measures or working memory functions, they need to be classified into more finer grained executive functions, like phonological working memory is actually can be further demarcated into phonological short-term store and articulatory rehearsal, while executive working memory consists of such executive functions as updating, switching, inhibition, etc. So these are more finer grained executive functions or embedded processes that we should be looking at when we are looking at the text. Working memory span tasks. Simple memory span tasks are tasks like digit span, word span. Of course, the most common one is the non-word repetition span. While for complex memory span tasks are span tasks like reading span, operation span, the embed span is that's very controversial actually, as we shall see. So in this framework, through this framework, we can look at working memory, from components to functions and to text and to real world language performance. So that is how we conceptualize the relationship between working memory and SLA. So that is the integrated perspective. And of course, because of this integrated perspective, we also need to take a second look at language measures, or working memory span tasks. So phonological short-term memory, usually can be measured by non-word repetition span tasks. For example, these are the non-words that are abiding by the phonetic rules of English. Like tablets, acla, they sound like English, but not real English words. So through this, people cannot rely on, we assume that they cannot rely on long-term memory. But of course, beware, recent studies from psychology has say, maybe this should also be reflecting to some extent our long-term memory. So it's very controversial, but it's the best we can do. And on the other hand, we have the executive working memory, which sometimes I call it complex memory span task, because it look at both storage and the processing part. And we have also other executive control memory span tasks like updating, inhibition, etc. So these are in terms of complex memory span tasks, we have the operation span task, which is what we call domains general. It is not confounding with language, with long-term memory, etc. But of course, there are people who should be aware. For example, like this is a typical operation span task, but it's also possible related to long-term memory. For example, Chinese are very good at calculations, or these kind of calculations may be influenced also by long-term memory. But that's the best we can do. We will try to still work hard to find the most appropriate, or what I call ecologically valid working memory span tasks. So if we look at the current measures of working memory, okay, there are simple memory span tasks and there are complex memory span tasks, okay, and of course, okay, people have tended to use different span tasks when they are looking at different aspects of SLA, okay, but in the past, that's what has been done. In the future, I think, okay, we need to consider, okay, that a working memory span task is a hierarchy, okay, or in other words, okay, there is a hierarchy of factors that are influencing working memory span task outcomes, okay. I wish I have kept emphasizing this study by our friend, okay, yeah, Dr. Chai and Professor Dong, okay, from Guangzhou, okay, and who has, okay, has done the preliminary research showing that the 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 array of factors that are influencing the task working memory span task outcome are hierarchical from the most important is information type and then modality, finally language, okay, so the importance are going in this direction, so we need to be aware, okay, and of course, okay, in other, okay, areas, like Milton Dan, okay, has argued that we need to use working memory profiles instead, okay, for example, we need to text there for not short-term memory, executive working memory, visual spatial working memory, episodic buffer, etc., so that we have a clearer idea of what their working memory is like. And of course, as we are moving on, we argue, okay, that working memory functions should be the focus of our texting in the future, so that we have more finer grained, okay, working memory span tasks, for example, the running memory span tasks, texting, updating, etc., and the embed tasks, for example, texting inhibitory control or updating, or both. Now that is a controversial one, but the embed task has been particularly popular among neuroscientists because when you are sending people to the fMRI machine, okay, they're not supposed to be speaking too much. So that is a good way that they have enjoyed, okay, using it, okay. So anyway, okay, overall development in working memory measures in SLA is from components to functions, particularly with modern technology like eye tracking and the fMRI, for example, okay. So focus on functions. That is the trend number one. Trend number two is, of course, we need to be reminded that working memory is better to understand it as a continuous, okay, factor rather than a maximum set size, which is less sensitive to the differences. So we better use the total performance scoring procedure, okay. And finally, of course, in our recent paper with Aaron Jobs and Paula Winke, okay, we argue that people should share their data, okay. So send your data to Iris, okay, when you have presented or where they have published, okay, a study, okay, or have validated any working memory span task, okay, send it to Iris so that people can share, and this is important, okay. Nowadays, all journals or key journals in applied linguistics or in cognitive science have asked for open science and data sharing. Okay, so this is important for future development so that we can make the best use of our available data, and for third, for example, second-hand, okay, for example, third-party use or like meta-analysis, etc. So these are the future development. So with that, so we can come to the converging evidence, okay, with working memory and second language, okay, relationship becoming clearer and clearer, okay. So there are evidence results, okay, from both large-scale studies and meta-analysis, okay. For example, large-scale correlation study at Maryland has found that working memory is a very good, sometimes even the best predictor of L2 learning outcomes, okay, longitudinal study. And of course, the most famous one also comes from Maryland, okay, by Jerry, okay, Link, okay, and they have found that, okay, working memory can explain about, okay, yeah, the P of the effect size is about 0.255, which is not too great, but moderate. But I would say that it depends on the measures, of course, okay, but this is a positive, okay, relationship between working memory and final and the process and final outcomes. And of course, in our recent, okay, paper that I'm currently, okay, contributing to the knowledge, okay, handbook of second language acquisition in individual differences, okay, we have summarized the results for a number of meta-analysis, all showing that working memory is related to second language, even though again, okay, the correlation is not too impressive, but it's very positive, okay. And link is still the very, okay, the most, okay, important one here, has been cited the most, okay. So with that converging evidence, we can come up with some hypotheses, which I call the PE model, related to the phonological aspect of working memory and the executive aspect of working memory. So in the phonological aspect of working memory, okay, which is consisted of, okay, phonological short-term store and articulatory rehearsal mechanism, okay, and can be measured by simple memory span tasks, okay, it is particularly important for low L2 learners, for example, and it is related to the aspects of lexers, formulaic sequences, morphosynthetic constructions that are, okay, relying on what we call chunking, okay, or in this sense, okay, phonological working memory is more related to the acquisitional or developmental aspects of SLA, while on the other hand, executive working memory functions, okay, they are more to do with the monitoring or attention resource, okay, directing, okay, functions of working memory, and it can be measured by the complex memory span tasks like reading span, operation span, etc. Okay, and they are particularly, okay, important for more advanced, okay, or intermediate L2 learners, okay, particularly in L2 comprehension, okay, L2 production, L2 interaction, etc. So, and in different, okay, skills and processes. So of course, this is the very rough, okay, hypothesis, which we can keep refining. But at least we have somebody who can raise it up, okay, and give us some thinking and some directions for future research. Okay, so that is the impetus for me to put this forward, okay, by basing on previous studies, and we can, okay, have something on hand, okay, to refer to. So with that, we can have similar, okay, similar hypothesis, okay, related to the two components of working memory, okay, so that on the first, okay, area, which is the phonological loop, okay, phonological working memory, I am arguing that it is the language learning device, okay, as Alan Baddeley and colleagues have called it, okay, and it is particularly related to the complexity or to the chunking aspects of language, particularly vocabulary, which is chunking, okay, of sounds, okay, formulaic sequences, phrases, okay, grammar constructions, etc. So, and we have already got emerging, okay, evidence from the literature, okay. And on the other hand, as we have mentioned just now, executive aspects of working memory are usually found to be more important or implicated in L2 comprehension and production processes, including interactions and interpreting, which I argue that it is the combination of comprehension and production. So if that we can have some hypothesis formulated, which can which was based on previous study, but can also, okay, guide future studies, and they could belong, but we need to have somebody to put forward this first, okay, so that when people are interested in doing this research, they have something to refer to, okay. So one case of application is in L2 task-based performance, okay. The cognitive aspects of L2 task-based performance, okay, in the past, okay, Rob Ellis has argued that there are three underlying constructs, okay, cognitive constructs. Number one is attention and noticing. Number two is focus on form mechanism. And finally is working memory capacity, okay. But of course, okay, how has working memory influenced task space? Okay, that is an issue that is important to explore, okay. And as we also can familiar in TBLT, okay, task-based language performance, okay, there are three major theoretical models, and all of them have touched on working memory. But I will focus on the two Peters model, okay, Peter Skian's and Peter Robinson's, okay, models, okay, as we can see. So for Peter Skian, for example, in his famous, okay, limited attention capacity hypothesis, okay, which was inspired by Level's, okay, L1 speaking model, in which he believed that formulation, the second stage is most important, okay, for working memory, or in other words, working memory plays a most important role in this aspect, okay. And so, of course, as we know that a trade-off is important among the different dimensions because of the limited attention. You cannot focus on everything, okay. But on the other hand, okay, Peter Robinson has argued the opposite, okay. Working memory should be more evident in complex tasks than simple tasks, okay, as complex tasks involve, okay, resource directing variables that direct or divert working memory to the input that complex task promotes. As we can see, these are only hypotheses, and more and more research research studies are being conducted to testify these two hypotheses. And we can see that there are, first of all, working memory and pre-task planning, okay, and we do find very inconsistent, okay, results. That is beyond discussion for tonight, okay, for this time, okay. But we do have empirical studies for this area, okay. So what we are trying to say is, or as Rob Ellis has mentioned, that the working memory maybe can be considered as a potential means for reducing, okay, or in other words, task planning or task structure or task conditions can be considered as potential means for reducing working memory burden. I mean, it is very sensible because, as we say, working memory limits are everywhere or are permeating in second language, okay, processing. So it is possible that everything we do, we try to reduce working memory burden. So that is how we design tasks, that how we offer, okay, people the time to plan, okay, how do we manipulate the task structure. It is all about reducing the working memory burden, okay. And so this is an emerging area which is still on the rise, but a lot to do, okay. And also, of course, as I have mentioned just now, we need to be aware that there are three possible effects on task base from working memory. The first one is main task, main effects. The second one, interaction effects, and the third one, threshold effects. So these can be three possible ways to design working memory task-based research. And of course, we can we can look at L2 task, okay, performance from all literature, and then we can add working memory to it, okay. So that is a huge, okay, research program for us to undertake, and it is only at the beginning, or what we call at its infancy. So a lot to do, okay. So I am arguing, okay, from very early beginning to recent years, okay, for example, from 2005, okay, when I first published my paper in Chinese, okay, I already argue, okay, working memory as foreign language aptitude, okay. So we are approaching this ultimate goal, as I shall call, okay. So it is the ultimate goal, okay. So in the future, we can look at the three effects of working memory: the main effects, the interaction effects, and the threshold effects, okay. And of course, my current foci is, okay, we look at working memory as individual differences underpinning, okay, different SLA stages and different L2 cognitive processes, okay. As I've mentioned, we need to distinguish between, okay, domains, acquisitional and developmental domains versus processing and skill learning, okay. So that is important. And also, of course, we need to look at working memory and L2 task performance. So all these are interacting, okay, variables that may serve as potential means for reducing the working memory burden, because it is the overall, okay, limits of working memory that is shaping our language acquisition and processing. So that is the general picture for my idea in relation to working memory effects, or to the role of working memory in first and second language and even human cognition. Okay, so my ultimate goal is to provide a framework or taxonomy of working memory, which is a fine-grained working memory components and, okay, functions. Okay, so of course, in my PE model, phonological working memory can be conceived as language learning device following Alan Baddeley's idea, while executive working memory can be considered as a language processing device, or simply called processor, okay, because it is more related to do with processing. So that is important because in linguistics, okay, Noam Chomsky has, okay, mentioned as early as 1965, okay, that language, okay, is important for the ideal speaker listener, and who knows its language perfectly and is unaffected by such grammatically irrelevant conditions as memory limitations, distractions, shifts of attention and interest, and errors, random or characteristic, in applying his knowledge of the language in actual performance. So this has been dominating the field of linguistics for half a century, but in recent years, people are arguing that maybe it's not true. Okay, so memory limitations or working memory limitations. Still remember the magical four, the magical number 4 and 7, etc. They maybe are hidden. Okay, maybe hidden in grammar. Okay, some of them argue. Okay, and they are influencing the acquisition and character of language from phonology all the way to grammar, as William O'Grady has argued, okay, rendering working memory as a new candidate of language aptitude and part and parcel to language acquisition device. So currently we are working on a broad, okay, overview of working memory and language, including second language. Okay, so that is a ambitious project that we are undertaking, but we are making good progress with our chapters coming in for the Cambridge Handbook of Working Memory and Language. So to end my talk, okay, I wish to say that so the PE model aims to integrate multiple perspectives from cognitive sciences including psychology, okay, neuroscience, etc., and SLA theories. Okay, so as I shall call it, okay, thus achieving synergy effects. Okay, it is important to integrate, but of course it's difficult to integrate, as many people have advised me. Okay, so on the other hand, we also need to put SLA into a better order, as Nicholas and Van Patten has argued in the past. For example, working memory, from a working memory perspective, okay, we are looking at its relationship to different acquisitional and developmental aspects, and then language processing and use aspects. So these are different aspects, or what Bill and Patton has called a domains versus skills, okay, that is important. And finally, we have taken for granted that, or in other words, we have relying too much on psychology for working memory span measures. We are doing nothing to improve the text. And remember, in the past, or even in the future, or even now, okay, we have more people who are bilingual than people who are monolingual. We need to check whether, okay, working memory span tasks are equally valid for bilingual speakers, because we don't have our own working memory span tasks, okay, that are particularly relevant for L2 learning, because so far we have been relying on psychology, on cognitive psychology. So look at all these working memory span tasks. They are all borrowed from psychology. So is it time to think about what Nordis Ortega has called the bilingual turn? Okay, so that is something we need to work very hard, okay, so that we can make as Robert Kaiser has and Aaron Jobs has said, we can return to psychology. But so far we haven't got it. But more importantly, okay, we need to look at the dynamic L1, L2 scenarios, okay, and this one has not been addressed in current working memory SLA research. So a lot to do, okay, for us, okay. Finally, okay, so why I put forward this PE model, okay, because I'm thinking with these, okay, working memories SLA juxtapositions in place, okay, we are now aligning them together. They would allow us to form finer grained theoretical links between working memory components and functions on the one hand, and specific SLA domains and activities on the other, so that we are now formally making inroads into each other. That is what we call cognitive approaches to second language acquisition research. So in this way, it allows us to make more motivated and more specific, more novel and textable predictions within the working memory SLA nexus. I use Michael Ullman's DP model as my emulation model, okay, for this PE model, right? So let's look to the future. So number one, we need to change our mindsets, okay, for working memory, because from the past, it is dominated by a multi-component model. It is nothing wrong with that, but we also need to consider working memory as a multi-componential, complex, adaptive, emergent, and dynamic cognitive resource system that is shaping and constraining our language and human cognition. Okay, and it should be measured with ecologically valid, okay, working memory span tasks for language, for human cognition, and for bilingual studies or second language acquisition. So a lot to do, okay. Number two, working memory as language aptitude, okay, the PE model, for example, so that we can, so in order to be considered as a working memory, as a language component, language aptitude, okay, it needs to be texting, okay, to be texted, okay, need to be explaining SLA, and it needs to be applied in second language learning that can be informing L2 pedagogy, okay. And finally, I'm even thinking of more ambitious, okay, goal, which is working memory as language acquisition device, in which it constrains and shapes first and second language acquisition, processing, development, and evolution. So here is a model for language aptitude, and in which I believe that working memory can be one key component. And I will end it here. So in order to follow up, okay, you can download my papers from my personal websites, Google Scholar, ResearchGate, Academia, etc. So these are the recent papers that I've been writing, and you can also ask me for a copy if you are interested in the idea. And of course, I'm working on some current book projects in which we have a cognitive individual differences in second language acquisition, and then a Cambridge Handbook of Working Memory and Language forthcoming, hopefully next year. And at the moment, I'm also working on a number of volumes. So all these books are available from Amazon together with some new books. Please keep an eye on it. So I will stop here. Thank you all very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to leave them below, and we will reply to it as soon as we can. And again, thank you all for the intention. Bye-bye. So I will stop here, and let's see.